and all of that is now being investigated. He also said that they think this was the act by a single person, who's in custody, so there's no danger to the public anymore tonight in that town. But obviously, people are now on edge, and I think that will be felt across Christmas markets in Germany in the coming days, as this is something that a lot of Germans, a lot of visitors will go to. They'll meet their friends. They'll do some last-minute Christmas shopping there. So this will definitely have an impact, and also bring back the memories of similar incidents in the years from about 2015 to 2019, when there were terror attacks or other mass casualty events in European cities.
Carlos, stay with me. Frank, welcome. How do authorities, law enforcement, look at an attack like this that is apparently targeted within the holiday season?
Right. So these Christmas markets, of course, in Germany, a long-held cultural tradition, and they are considered soft targets. And as has been said before, the last time something like this happened was 2016. It was credited to ISIS, who took credit for it. It was a Tunisian individual who had failed at asylum attempts. Moving forward from that, they put barricades at most of these Christmas markets, and they've helped tremendously. Ironically, as recently as yesterday, the German media was interviewing people about how they felt about safety at the Christmas markets in this season, and almost uniformly, they said they felt safer. So something didn't work here, obviously, with barricades and security. What's happening now is intelligence services in Germany and really throughout Europe and perhaps the world will go backwards in time and scrub their holdings, their intercepts, their sources. Was there anything missed? Did we hear anything at all about this being coordinated, organized? They'll be listening to see if anybody's taking credit for it. They'll be diving deeply into this individual's social media, his writings, interviewing his associates, colleagues, family. Was he self-radicalized? Does he have mental instability issues? All of that being done even as we speak to try to determine whether there's any ongoing threat, whether this was connected to a terror organization or truly a one-off with someone who thinks this makes perfect sense for him, but probably won't make sense to anyone else.
And Frank, what's the current climate and context of security threats in Germany and Western Europe?
Yeah, well, look, we're still, the West is still under a jihad threat, generally speaking. The Gaza, Israeli, Iranian situation, throw in Lebanon and Hezbollah, really resulted in a number of threats that really concerned us. They seem to have quieted, so that threat might have dissipated, but Germany itself has had incidents of violence this year. In fact, one such incident where a police officer was stabbed caused the government to say no more knives at Christmas markets. We're banning knives at Christmas markets. Ironically, of course, this was not a knife attack, but rather an automobile.
Carlo, what else can you tell us about the overall dynamic there, particularly from your reporting in the region, not only today, but overall?
I mean, it's certainly an ongoing tense mood in Central Europe. I think that is not just related to any terror threat, but I think overall also the security picture given the war in Ukraine, and also now as we go into the transition to the Trump administration, what that might mean for Europe and for the support of the U.S. To Europe. I mean, even in an incident tonight, U.S. Security officials will probably talk to their German counterparts, their French counterparts, because obviously they want to make sure that if this was terror-related, that not others are now inspired by an incident like the one tonight. But overall, I think people had actually been more relaxed at large events, at Christmas markets, compared to the years of where there was a heightened threat. kind of pre-pandemic when there were a lot of ISIS-related attacks. And so I think people had gotten more relaxed. They had kind of gotten used to the concrete barriers or other barriers that have been installed at these markets to stop vehicle attacks. But tonight is a reminder that even if there are heightened security systems in place, they obviously weren't able to stop this vehicle and this driver.
Carlo, thank you, and stay safe. Frank, we're going to be turning to you actually for some domestic legal news coming up. Right now, though, the other big story, if you're watching the news today, if you saw Nicole's coverage, has been the ongoing expectations for a vote in Congress. This would deal with the spending clash, potentially avert the government shutdown. Republican infighting, though, has brought the country closer to the brink of that. So that vote's coming up. NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent, our colleague Ali Vitale, has been covering all of this closely. What is happening right now?
Well, we're finally starting to see some movement here, Ari, because at around 2 o'clock, Republican leaders had all huddled for a few hours. They seemed to come out with a new sense of confidence that the government shutdown was going to be averted, but they didn't say how, and they didn't exactly detail when. Now we have answers to both of those questions, because in just the last few minutes, they've released the text of this long-awaited bill. It is much shorter than its original form that it started in at the beginning of the week, but it is also now going to be voted on at some point in the next hour. We know that Democrats right now are just getting their first look at this bill, because after Donald Trump and Elon Musk basically worked together to tank the original bipartisan version of this deal, Republicans at that point seemed keen to just keep them in the dark. And so while we have known the details of this package for a few hours now, Democrats have frankly either been coming to me, other members of our team. Now they are going to get to read the bill text itself. That's going to be a key family discussion for them as they figure out how they're going to proceed here. The bill itself is exactly what we reported all day. No surprises in the intervening hours. It basically pulls apart a skinny version of keeping the government open. It funds the government in part until March 14th. It also includes disaster relief funding for those states hard hit by recent hurricanes. And then it also includes an extension of the Farm Bill. Important to note that what it doesn't include is Musk and Trump's key priority of raising or abolishing the debt ceiling. That is not in it. It's going to be interesting to see the way that Trump and Musk respond. I can say just from a cursory glance at social media, Elon Musk does not seem thrilled. We'll see what the ramifications of that are. But right now, we're in a posture of knowing what they're voting on and not knowing what the vote is going to be. There's one important thing that we're looking at, and it's the method that they're using to do this, Ari. They're doing it through a process called suspension, and that means they need a higher number of votes in order to pass this. The rule is it needs a 2/3 majority on the House floor, and that means that Republicans are absolutely going to need Democrats. So we're going to be watching that Democratic meeting that started about 10 minutes ago extremely closely to see if any of these members, all of whom except 2 or 3 rather, were no's yesterday, if any of them have come around given the ways that this package has shifted.
Ali, as you know, sometimes we turn to the wisdom of lyrics or poetry to make sense of the world. Today, I want to turn to just an old cliche, not a lyric. But you know the old cliche, you can win the war, but it's sometimes harder to win the peace.
Yeah.
And I wonder, in all seriousness, whether Donald Trump won the election. He staged a political comeback, and I think everyone witnessed that. And yet it seems that before they've even begun governing next month, and they can continue to revise and improvise, it might be harder to govern than to campaign, especially if Elon Musk is in this pseudo role. He's a non-employee outside advisor who named his advisory group after one of his business products, Doge, and has done what he's done all week. You've covered it. I think our viewers are somewhat familiar. Are they having a harder time with the peace part, the governing part, perhaps, than the campaign part?
I think that's probably the biggest lesson here, Ari. I don't think there's going to be peace. You can't have it when you have margins that look like the ones that House Republicans have right now. It means that this divergent group of people who all call themselves Republicans but have different iterations of what that means, they all have to get on the same page. And in many cases on all these issues, they're not, or they're not on the same page as purely as some conservatives want, or as moderately as more moderate members want. And so there is going to be this constant haggling. We saw a little bit of this in the last 2 years that Republicans have had a tight majority. It lost them a speaker. It caused them weeks of chaos. It almost feels fitting, frankly, that we ended this year, or seem to be ending this year, the very way that we started it, which is with potential rounds of different votes, not knowing how they're going to happen on the floor, not knowing if they're going to succeed, unclear on if the speaker will remain the speaker a few short weeks from now when they come back and start the next Congress. This has really been, I think, an instructive moment for members on both sides of the aisle. Republicans are getting the sense of what it's going to look like, not just to have Trump looking over their shoulder, making sure that he endorses all the key pieces of their negotiating, but then also having Elon Musk freelance on the side, knowing that he could choose to throw a big chunk of change towards any primary challenge that he might see fit. And then also knowing that they do seem to have a prerequisite of needing to work with him on the DOGE campaign to cut government funding, despite the fact, you're right, he's not elected, he's not a member of the cabinet, and DOGE is actually not an agency of the federal government. It's just sort of this newly created arm that Donald Trump has made and then deputized two of his closest allies to run. I think Johnson learned some key lessons here, but also Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who's looking over at the way that Johnson's careful deal-making was scuttled over the course of, a few dozen Elon Musk tweets and then a statement from the president-elect. He's looking at that quite closely, too, because he's got his own members who are ultra-conservatives, who align more closely with MAGA than they do with republicanism. And this is going to be a dynamic for Republicans that they have to track. And now Democrats are getting a better taste of this, too. We've seen them do some trolling, saying it's President Musk. Certainly, that's all part of the game of politics from a public perspective. But behind the scenes, there's clearly going to be starting from a trust deficit that was already there, but between Johnson and Jeffries had actually been pretty good because Johnson had been seen as sort of a rational actor who could be trusted in these kinds of negotiations. Now it's clear that he's maybe not the one who's solely running the show here, and he's really at the whims of two bigger men, both the president and his closest ally at this point, Elon Musk. So there's a lot of learning that's happening here in this building. And I know we're talking about it as if we're past a government shutdown, but again, we know it's going to the floor. We are not exactly sure, at least not yet, that they necessarily have the votes to pass it.
Yeah, really appreciate a detailed breakdown, Allie. Stay with me. I want to bring back Reverend Al Sharpton, who has been part of MSNBC's coverage. Rev, part of the discussion here is the difference between power, which no one can deny Elon Musk has a type of it, and leadership, which involves something more than the raw exercise of power and threats, even if you have a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that we really are seeing something unprecedented when you can see someone who's on the public stage merely because of his wealth, that has not been elected by anybody, will not have to go in front of a Senate committee, nothing, that's going to run a government arm that is really not official, but that he can veto the entire